Welcome back to the Baunfire Gaming Podcast, episode 333. I'm your host, Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about Elder Scrolls Oblivion rumors seem to be true, Nintendo reopening pre-orders in the USA, PlayStation 5 prices are going up, and much more. This week, I think was one, and it's been a process, I think, over time, maybe over years, months, but especially weeks and days. But gaming is getting more expensive. And I think, unfortunately, that is a thing that is just going to be the reality of this hobby, this activity, whatever you consider it, moving forward. It has been this way before. All the time, especially in defense of Nintendo recently, you see people being like, well, games used to be like $80, and that was, in old money times, right? So they'd be over $100 at this point if they kept that same, if they kept up with inflation and such. That is kind of a disingenuous thing, at least in my opinion. What that argument tends to ignore is that at that time, in the 80s and even 90s, gaming was a pretty small industry. It was a very niche product for a really small community. And therefore, if you were only going to sell a few thousand copies of a game at best, they had to be fairly expensive to cover the cost. You also had comparatively very small teams. It wasn't the quote, I don't want to say quote unquote, it wasn't the, efficient thing it is now, if you consider what it is now efficient. Probably the most efficient time for video games was like the 2000s, when you could have like the late 2000s, you had BioWare release Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3 all on the Xbox 360 / PlayStation 3 generation. Like, that's crazy. They did it all within like 5 years or something. Now you're lucky if a single game gets completed in 5 years. So it used to be expensive, but for different reasons. Then it got more affordable in the 2000s and 2010s. And now it's going back up. And it's not going back up because it's becoming a niche thing again. It's going back up for lots of other reasons. So I just think that it's just a thing we have to buckle in for. It's not just tariffs. It's not just inflation. There's lots of things going on. One thing, it is partially just greed. Right. At least in my opinion, we have this situation where, the Xbox Series X and the PS5 were 500 when they came out. The Switch was, I think, 300. Well, now the Switch 2 is 450. The PS5 Pro is $700. I think that there's a very realistic chance the next Xbox and the PlayStation 6 could be $750 to $1,000. And so the reaction to that by a lot of people is going to be like, well, I'll just get I'll just get a PC. Well, we just this week, and I'll talk more about it, but the 5060, NVIDIA's low end graphics card, just the graphics card, the good one, the only one you should really buy if you get one, is going to be, I think it's $450. That's just a graphics card. You're not talking about your motherboard, your CPU, all your cooling, your RAM, your memory, your Windows license, your, everything else. And you're over $1,000 easily. From what I've seen, you can get a cheap computer nowadays. If you're just looking for 30 FPS, 1080p, you can probably get a computer for $500, especially if you go for used parts and build it yourself. But if you're the average person who just wants to go buy a computer that can play games, I don't think you're getting anywhere under $1,500, maybe closer to $2,000 for something worth buying, at least in my opinion. So we're going to be running into this future where to get into gaming, your bottom line is going to be Nintendo at $450 for a Switch 2, which, I think we will find there'll be some conversation about how much it's really worth. Or you're going to be looking at one of the next gen consoles at, $750+ or you'll be looking at going the PC route and spending over $1,000, probably closer to $2,000 just to get in. So it's weird times. I'm sure, independent stories will, go more into this over the next couple years, and we'll talk all about it. But that's kind of how I, for better or worse, wanted to open the show. Okay, let's get into the gaming news. First story: Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remaster rumored to be dropping in the next week. So I'm recording this on April 18th. It's the weekend before Easter. And it's claimed that on the 23rd, this is by Jeff Grubb, they may do a shadow drop or at least some kind of announcement of this Elder Scrolls Oblivion remaster. Supporting this is that Virtuous, who's a third-party developer who has been rumored for a long time to be making this this remaster, accidentally made public a bunch of pictures, basically a bunch of PR and marketing materials for this game, and now that's out there. It's graphical comparisons from the original game to this remaster, and some, I think, like box art and stuff like that. Yeah, the reaction to all of this has been very interesting. The one reaction I thought was kind of funny was people like telling everyone to give Jeff Grubb his flowers. Like, I'm pretty sure this has been a rumor for a really long time that at least this exists. And the release date and stuff, I don't pay attention to a ton of his stuff at this point. So maybe he's been talking about the 23rd or whatever for a while, and maybe that's where he's right. But this is a rumor that I remember going back for quite a while at this point. Because if I remember correctly, like 2 or 3 years ago, this was the game that was rumored that they were using Unreal Engine 5 for the visuals, but they were going to be using the old Creation Engine or whatever Elder Scrolls Oblivion is on, basically to work like in the background and to kind of run all of the RPG systems and stuff like that. As someone, I won't pretend to be a game developer. I don't fully understand how all of these things work. I know enough though to know that that sounds like a friggin' nightmare, because the Creation Engine on its own is kind of known for not being a bad engine, but just being something that is very dated and maybe isn't, but that also means it's well known. But then the idea of figuring out how to make the Creation Engine, which is a pretty demanding engine, even though it's pretty outdated in a lot of like animation ways and graphics, even though if they're using Unreal Engine 5 for those, maybe it doesn't matter. But to use Creation as the back end and then use Unreal Engine 5 as what you actually see and interact with, look, I don't know. The people of Virtuous are probably very smart and capable. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm very curious. What makes that really interesting to me, though, is that it opens up the tiniest possibility that in the future, for the next Elder Scrolls game, for the next Fallout game, hell, for me, for Starfield 2, as dirty as that may be to say around some people, that seems like it could open up a possibility in the future of, of Bethesda addressing a lot of the issues people have with their more recent games, without completely abandoning. Bethesda seems really dedicated to sticking with Creation Engine, even though in some ways it's extremely outdated. Even from Starfield, a game I adore, a game I love, I won't pretend like its animations are even our current gen. They aren't. Like, a lot of the animations are pretty rough. The graphics, I think, there's more to argue there. Maybe some of the environmental stuff isn't great. Some of the trees and stuff on the main planet are pretty dated looking. But then you have things like some of the food items in Starfield are like the most realistic looking things I've ever seen. Even the human models are better than you think. I think it's the animation of the humans that makes them look worse, because the actual models are fairly high fidelity. Like, they actually look pretty good. It's the movement underneath them that kind of makes them look worse. So this is interesting. I've never been an Elder Scrolls guy. Last year I tried Skyrim for the first time. I've never played it before, and I just missed out on the nostalgia. I played it for a few hours and I very much did not enjoy my experience. It's a very dated game, and I played whatever the most recent version of it is. I don't know if there's more versions of Skyrim or The Last of Us at this point, but it was whatever the most recent version of Skyrim is that they released, and so it has like some updates and things like that. I just couldn't get into it, so I'll be curious about this. If it's part of Game Pass, I'll definitely check it out. I'll be really interested to see it and experience it. I would be surprised if it ends up being this like big thing for me. As well as we have some games coming up in the next week, like Expedition 33, the Claire Obscure game, being the one I'm the most excited about currently. Probably the game I'm the most excited about this year. So. We'll see. I may dabble in Oblivion if it really does drop this week, but yeah, Claire Obscure is going to be be the thing I'm a little more focused on. Moving over to some Nintendo announcements, they are going to reopen pre-orders for the Switch 2 in the US on April 24th, and the price is going to stay the same, both for the base model, the $450 one, as well as the bundle with Mario Kart at $500. They are raising the price on accessories. I think it looks like it was like 5 to 10%. It wasn't that much. I'm curious to how this is going to play out. So my two theories are either that the Switch 2 has such a insane profit margin at 450 that they know they can take a pretty big hit on that and still make money. I talked about it last week, but Nintendo is very protective over their profit margins, where you may see an Xbox or a PlayStation sell their hardware at like a slight loss or even just a marginal profit. You won't see Nintendo do that. They especially at scale. There's a reason, and I reference it all the time. You can roll your eyes, but back to that Activision Blizzard King acquisition court case in the US, when those documents got leaked, where all of the platforms had to report their earnings to kind of show, to basically fight against that acquisition. It showed that over a 1 year period, Nintendo made it was like they had like a 25 or 30% profit margin, which is wild because I believe Sony's was somewhere around 5% and Xbox's was around 10%. And there's reasons for those, and we won't get into those again, but Nintendo, they make money. they make sure they make money, and that's why they're such a healthy company. And good for them. That's great. So I think that maybe that profit margin on the Switch 2 is so good that they don't feel like they need to adjust for tariffs, at least not yet. And or they stockpiled so many Switch 2s in the US before the tariffs. It's been proposed this system has been ready for like maybe multiple years. So there's a chance they've been manufacturing them for a really long time and maybe had tons of stock they could move over these, the last few months or even years, that they may have enough for pre-orders in the US already, and they can sell those at 450 because they weren't tariffed. But then once they run out of that stock, I assume on day one, the pre-orders are going to be insane for this thing. I would be curious to see if in the future we see a $50, $100 jump on the price as the units people are buying are ones that were tariffed. There's the tariff thing is weird right now. I won't pretend to be some political analysis person on that. It seems like it's changing fairly quickly. A lot of the big tariffs against like Vietnam and stuff have been reduced a decent amount, even though the US is putting in a bunch of protections so that China can't just route stuff through other countries, because the tariffs with China could go up to like 250% is proposed right now. I think it's around 150%. We'll see. It's obviously some kind of negotiation tactic by a what I would perceive to be a very inept set of politicians, but we'll see how it plays out. My guess is that Nintendo doesn't believe these tariffs are going to last forever, so my assumption is hoping that whatever stock they have in the US already will hold them over until the situation does get resolved, and then they can ship more over and keep that 450 price. So we'll have to wait and see. I suspect it's both. I suspect that they have a healthy profit margin and they feel safe that they'll be able to still make money even if they have to take a hit. And they probably have a bunch here already that they can use for pre-orders. We'll have to wait and see. They did do a Mario Kart World showcase as well. I watched it. I haven't played Mario Kart in many, many, many years at this point, so I won't pretend to be an expert. But from the analysis and the kind of reactions I saw from people, it was kind of cool. Like they showed off a bunch of the open world stuff, some of the unique mechanics to all of that. I just got the impression from a lot of people being like, "Yep, that's what I expected." Not super hype, not super interesting, but that they're going to sell a ton of them. It's going to be super popular. It's Mario Kart, and it's the first new one they've made in many, many years. So just, if you want something revolutionary, you didn't get it. And if that makes you mad, then don't buy it. But a lot of other people are going to do it. One of the shows I was watching, I think it was kind of funny. They kept, having all these criticisms of the Switch 2, of Mario Kart World, all that. And then they just kept going back to, yeah, but I'm still going to buy it. Which is like what it seems like the kind of takes have been on the Switch 2 of, yeah, they're really messing all this stuff up. They're not doing this thing very well, but I'm still going to buy it. So if you ever wonder why Nintendo doesn't even bother to try to truly compete with the other platforms, that's why, and good for them. PlayStation 5 is getting higher prices in Europe, Australia, and New Zealand, making the digital roughly the same price as the disc version, and I believe the disc one is going up as well, and making I believe the disc drive is getting a small discount. I would assume to make the cost of getting the digital and the disc drive the same as just buying one with a disc drive. This is interesting. It comes along with that PlayStation Plus is getting a price jump in like a couple small territories. It's not like a universal jump. None of these prices have changed in the US, at least not yet. It's a strange move. So 5 years on from the release of a console, you expect that it'll at least stay the same price, if not get cheaper, and that's not what's happening. I'm sure there's tons of factors there, whether it's tariffs, whether it's, manufacturing issues, whatever. I suspect it may be profit issues. They either make a little bit or a decent amount of money on the PlayStation 5 hardware, but because they've had a really slow rollout of first-party titles over the last few years, their third-party exclusives have done fairly well, but they don't make as much money off of those as they do their own games. And then third-party games, kind of everyone has, and they only make so much off of that because of licensing stuff. So, yeah, strange move. And I suspect a big part of it is kind of like, yeah, we're the top dog. We know we are, at least between them and Xbox. So we can just do this. They've sold probably I believe the most recent number was over 60 million units sold. I'm not expecting the PS5 to sell 150 million units. So they've likely sold the majority of the consoles they're going to sell for this gen. They'll continue selling more. The PS5 Pro has sold fairly well for what it is, especially at its price. But it is weird. It's weird. And I expect it to go up everywhere eventually. I suspect this is kind of, they're rolling it out slowly. We have seen these companies roll it out in places other than the US and then keep the US the same. I assume that maybe there's enough volume being sold in the US that it's worth taking a little bit of a hit that they aren't willing to take other places. I don't know. That's all speculation on my part, but definitely strange, and definitely kind of supports what I said at the beginning of, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the next gen consoles be $750 or more. And it's probably going to be pretty reasonable if they're good, because by that point, I wouldn't be surprised if a entry level PC is over $2,000. And that's just kind of that's the future we're moving into, for better or worse. It's definitely worse. Speaking of PC, NVIDIA has revealed the 5060 Ti, the 8 and 16 gigabyte models. This does appear, from all the analysis I've seen so far, to be a slight upgrade to the 4060 generation, but not the 4070 cards. For me personally, I was actually considering getting a 5060 Ti 16 gig model if it performed similar, if not a little better, than the 4070 Ti I currently have, because it only has 12 gigs of RAM. Sorry, and It doesn't, as far as I can tell. It's not an upgrade at all to that. I was interested in the newer DisplayPort technology and things like that to match up with my monitors better. But I'll have to wait. I would love to have a 5070 Ti, but they're like $1,000 right now, even though they're supposed to be 700. So not happening. Unwilling to pay that. We'll see if it ever happens. The one of the big things, it's what I was talking about with the console and at the beginning of the show, is there was a time where, like, right now, if things were the way they used to be, you would be able to buy like a 4070 Ti for like 400 or 500 bucks and build a pretty solid PC for under 1,000. But what happens now, and I'm sure there's lots of factors, but like I said before, I think greed is a big part of it, is that they just make so few of these cards, it seems like, especially after their main selling push, that there is no stock. Like, you can't buy a 4070 right now, and if you can, it's way over MSRP. I feel like a brand new 4070 Ti, I saw it recently, was like $800. It's $50 more than I paid for it when it was the new thing, a year or two ago. That's why I was considering getting a 5070 Ti, because I was going to get it for 450 if I could, and then sell my 4070 Ti for the same, or if not a little more than what I bought it for, and end up ahead, right? It's not going to happen. I'm not going to do that now, but just the fact that that's even a possibility is wild, and shows you just how crazy this market is right now, and how just not very entry level it is for anyone, at least in my opinion. So we'll see. Even those $450 5070 Ti's or 5060 Ti's, like, they seem like they're going to be pretty decent. Like, if you want like a nice solid like 1080p machine that can run really well, but there's almost no chance you're going to find any of them for 450. I bet you're going to find most 5060 Ti's for five, maybe six, maybe 650, maybe $700. Because if the 5070 is supposed to be 700 and they're going for 1,000, then the 5060, which is supposed to be like 400, is probably going to go for maybe 600, if not more. It's weird. They seem like they're decent cards. The 8 GB no one is suggesting, because 8 gigs just isn't enough for most modern games. If you aren't planning on playing modern games, it might be okay, and it's at an even better price point, down under 400. But for me, like, even having a 12 gig card, I really wish my 4070 Ti was 16, but it's not. I'm okay for now. I can run everything the way I want, especially using DLSS and all that stuff. But I don't know. We'll see. Things are getting pricey out there. Ubisoft is reportedly working on Project Scout, which is an Apex Legends inspired battle royale. I won't go on this too long. I've talked about this before. Ubisoft is such a strange company to me. I have a lot of love for their IP, for a lot of it at least. I really, really like their Ubisoft Massive Studio. I love The Division. I'm excited about the next one. I really enjoyed Assassin's Creed Shadows. I've got better vibes for Ubisoft than most people, but I will still hold to this day, and they've even done this with the Division franchise. They are just 5 years behind perpetually. And I truly believe from the bottom of my heart, it's Yves Guillemot and the other executives they're too safe. They're stuck in the past. That company is way too big. It's not agile enough. They have way too many studios. They have way too many developers. They have 40 studios, and it's like 30,000 devs or something, or employees, and they put out like one game a year. It's crazy. It's wild. So here we go. They're going to do a battle royale, which is probably 5 years too late, at least, if not more. They're going to try to copy Apex Legends in some capacity, which I don't doubt. It's just going to be like dollar store Apex Legends, and if it even makes it out, it'll be like, X Defiant, where it'll be out for a year and then they'll shut it down. Props to Ubisoft. When they put games out, they normally support them extremely well. For Honor is still getting updates, but they just, the trend chasing, man, it's crazy. They can't get out of that cycle for some reason. It's really strange. Xbox has their mobile app getting a big update where you can finally buy games on there, which I think you used to be able to, and now you can't, as well as a bunch of other new features on there. I will take this moment to throw out that, please, for the love of all that's good, bring back the ability on the PC app to manage my captures, the videos and screenshots. They used to have the Xbox companion app, which you could do that stuff with, and it was amazing. You could even like trim clips and download and share and all that. And they shut that down for some reason. They moved over some of its features over to the PC Xbox app, but not the ability to manage your clips and screenshots. So the only way to really do it easily is either to use the app, which it still works, that works pretty well, or to sync all of your captures to OneDrive and then use the OneDrive app to do all that stuff on your PC or their website. And that's fine. It technically works, but it's not nearly as convenient as just having a tab on the PC app, just like you have on the mobile app, to do that stuff in one place. Like why don't you should want people to be sharing stuff from your app and using your using your tech and collecting their info and all that. Like you should want that. So hopefully they get back to that eventually. But the thing with the Xbox app that's cool, I really hope they consolidate those apps eventually, where I think that there's a Game Pass app where you can play games, and then there's this app. I believe one of these updates is where you can stream games from your Xbox to your phone directly instead of using their servers. Depending on your setup, that could be better or worse. So they keep doing this. They're obviously trying to integrate everything a lot more, which I think is a good thing. I've had a lot of success with having play everywhere games and things like that, but they still have a way to go. Battlefield, DICE, EA has posted a new blog about Battlefield and the testing they're doing for the next game. It's been talked about as Battlefield 6, but we don't know what its actual title is yet. And the big focus this time was on environmental destruction. That is a topic that's been very heated over the last few Battlefield games. Specifically, 2042 has a pretty minimal amount of destruction when it comes to buildings and stuff like that. There's a few maps, there's a few areas that it's reminiscent of the old games, but not very much. They've already shown off from the very beginning with this next game that that's a big focus for them, to do permanent changes to the map that changes lanes that you can go down for fighting and things like that. So that's exciting. That's what this was mostly about, them trying to balance opening up new lanes of attack and flanking possibilities, and then even how things work, where like if you blow up the side of a building, does the falling debris kill players who are near it? How far away does it kill players? Like trying to figure that stuff out. That's why I think this Battlefield Labs thing that they're doing, where they are having people test it and test the game and these things early, and like actual people, not just people they pay to come in and play it, or content creators, it is great. I think it's going to end up making this next game way better out of the gate, and I am super excited to check it out. I have not made it to the test, by the way. David Gator, former BioWare employee and kind of the father of Dragon Age in a lot of ways, claims that EA and BioWare gave preference to the Mass Effect franchise and development team over the Dragon Age franchise and development team, despite Dragon Age selling more. With very great timing, Mark Dara made a video kind of addressing this as well, talking about how Dragon Age has sold more copies than Mass Effect, but that Mass Effect has had way more cultural impact and is more like notable in the gaming community. I think there's a lot to this. So David Gator, I think if you followed him, you wouldn't even know he started his own studio, has released a game, and has another game coming out. He basically, it seems like whenever he wants an article written about him, he just says something about BioWare, and then will like kind of on the side be like, oh, by the way, here's this thing I have coming. So I guess, it's good advertising, I guess. He's obviously extremely biased for Dragon Age, and though I think what he said here is probably hangs true, and I would say like good. Like I think Mass Effect is the more like marketable franchise of the two, and the whole thing with it selling more copies feels a little disingenuous to me, because Dragon Age 1, Dragon Age Origins and 2 sold okay, and then Inquisition came out right at when the industry was really booming consumer wise, and Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3 kind of came out in a similar time frame as the first two Dragon Age games, and they sold well, but not like insanely. And then Andromeda actually sold okay. Sold pretty well from what I've seen, even though it wasn't, it didn't go gangbusters. But something like, I tried to add it up, but it was something like 70% or something of Dragon Age sales was Inquisition. And, there's more factors there. So I think purely just being like, well, Dragon Age just sold more than Mass Effect means it's a healthier franchise or whatever. I don't think that's entirely true. I think that's a very lacking context. It doesn't tell the whole story, at least in my opinion. I'm also biased. So, but yeah, I don't know. I think they're good conversations to have. The problem is then you had a bunch of like Dragon Age fans be like, I've always hated Mass Effect and now I just hate it more. It's like, and Gator, I think is pretty irresponsible when he does some of this stuff. He's just trying to get clicks. He's trying to get IGN and Kotaku and all these people to write articles about him. I don't know if he's trying to fire up the Dragon Age fans or not. Maybe not. I have no idea. But it definitely seems like any chance he gets to take a dig at Ubisoft, or not Ubisoft, at BioWare and EA, which EA, fair enough. Honestly, BioWare, fair enough. But still, I don't know. I think it's very self-serving, but maybe I'm alone in that. Bungie showed us more about Marathon. I think I talked a little bit about this before, but this whole thing, there has been some clarification that it will be a premium product, meaning it will be paid, but it will not be $70 is kind of the discussion happening recently. It has it's going to start off with, I believe, 3 to 4 maps and a battle pass. From what I saw of the gameplay footage so far, it looks pretty slow paced. I thought this was going to be very much a like Apex style game. It seems way slower paced than that. The aesthetic is very Apex Legends in my opinion still. And it's, really going to focus on that balance of PvE and PvP and looting and extracting and doing all that. I don't know. One thing that's been interesting is how much people have been like, well, it's Bungie, so you at least know the shooting's going to be good. Like, I mean, maybe. Like, I think people, like, it's very interesting how that's been like the main line, even in recent years, of like, yeah, well, like maybe they didn't handle Destiny 1 great and Destiny 2 great. And the DLC's been hit or miss and blah, 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 blah. But like the shooting's amazing. I'm like, I mean, it's fine. Like, I've played better. I think Apex Legends has better gunplay, as well as some other games, especially Tarkov, the true extraction king, even though it's got its own issues too. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is a game, and the conversation's been all about payment. I just don't think you have to do free to play on this if you're going to do expansions and a battle pass, especially. Or you do a $40, $50, $70 game, and at least everything at the beginning comes with it, right? And maybe it will. We'll have to wait and see. But if this battle pass is an additional fee, or what they'll do is they'll do a free battle pass and then a paid one that adds more items or whatever and more incentives. I don't know. I think that you're just asking. I posted it, on social media. I don't think PlayStation learned their lesson from Concord. I think this is a very different situation. This is a Bungie game, so that's going to get at least a little bit of credit there. It's going to have some automatic fan base. But I don't think Bungie's reputation is what it was 5-10 years ago. In fact, I think it's probably at the lowest it's ever been, or at least the most like, the least notable it's ever been, maybe is the better term. So I don't know. We'll see how this plays out. I'm curious to try it, but I don't know if I want to pay for it. Like, I just, especially I'm concerned after Concord and after a bunch of games that PlayStation has canceled. What if it comes out the gate, it, declined sharply player base wise in 6 months, and then they just shut it down? You'll probably get a refund, maybe not. I don't know. I'll have to wait and see. I need to see some takes on it that aren't people who are very Sony adjacent. And all of the coverage I've seen of Marathon so far, from especially the creators they invited out to play it, it was like a bunch of like podcasters who don't play PvP games, and they especially don't play extraction games, because God, everyone's comparing this game to Tarkov. I am willing to bet this game will feel nothing like Tarkov. But people who don't play it don't know that. They just, Tarkov's an extraction game. I'll say it's like Tarkov, even though Tarkov itself is like kind of a crappy game. It just happens to be somewhat popular. So we'll see how Marathon plays out. I don't have high expectations. We'll have to wait and see. Baldur's Gate 3 got their release of patch 8, which is the final patch for the game, at least the final major patch. It has a new subclass for every single different class. and as well as some other additions and stuff like that. This is exciting. It's been their way of kind of kicking off some other stuff too. They're obviously kind of ramping up their social media presence and YouTube and interviews and roundtables and all of that. I assume for whatever they're doing next, which I would guess they're at least deep in the pre-production on. I wouldn't be surprised if they're in full production on their next project, which I believe has been rumored to be like an original IP. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. I'm sad. I wish Larian was making another Baldur's Gate or at least some big DLC or whatever, but they aren't. And that's kind of just the reality of it. So people need to move on, and I'll be excited for what they do next. They got me to like the type of game I have never liked before, and I haven't liked since. So I will probably be a Larian stan, and will probably keep trying to play the other games. Supposedly Hasbro is trying to make a Baldur's Gate 4 with a different studio. We'll see how that plays out. I am curious. That is a tall order, I think. Stalker 2 got a big roadmap through the rest of 2025 with some huge updates. That's a game that once they like kind of really get it together and update a bunch of the stuff, I loved Stalker 2. It was one of my top games last year, even though it was very buggy and very flawed. It looks like a lot of the things that they're working on are the things I wanted to be better. So that's a game that I will likely at least dabble into another playthrough late this year or early next year. The Division 2, my beloved Division game, is getting a DLC here soon called Battle of Brooklyn, and it will get a showcase on April 23rd. I'm excited for that. I presume we're going to get a release date, and I bet it's sooner than later. I wouldn't be surprised if it's coming out in May. It's been multiple times delayed and all kinds of issues there. They did recently host a bunch of Division 2 creators and kind of Division personalities at their home office in Malmo, Sweden, at Ubisoft Massive. I was admittedly pretty jealous that I didn't get to go, even though they did invite someone who's like one of the most toxic, awful people I've ever interacted with online. But besides that, most of the people they invited were some of the best people I've ever met online. So it was cool to see a bunch of those people get that opportunity. I'm extremely jealous, and maybe one day I will talk my way into getting out there. We will see. Marvel Rivals is getting a swimsuit cosmetic event. Just of course they are, duh. And Arc Raiders is getting another community test. Every time I see something about Marathon, all I can think about is how I want to play Arc Raiders again, and hopefully that game comes out relatively soon. I can't really talk about it. I'm under a pretty strict NDA, but I've gotten to play it. This is probably breaking it, but I've gotten to play it multiple times over the last couple of years. It was pretty rough, and then it's gotten a lot better. So I think I can stay out of trouble by saying that. I'm really excited to check it out and where how they've updated it. I'm assuming this next test will probably be the last one before they do like a public test. And then I assume the game comes out this summer or this fall. So here's hoping they've landed that ship. For content updates, check out the new episode of the Mass Effect Hypecast over on YouTube or all podcast platforms. I talked about a big compiled list of features people want from the first 4 Mass Effect games in the next one, and that was a lot of fun, as well as speculation about in 7 Day this year, as well as kind of expanding on some hiring that they're currently doing and what that might mean for the next game and for the studio. I'm getting near the end of my Mass Effect 2 modded playthrough on Twitch. There's also VODs over on my YouTube. And so we'll be wrapping up Mass Effect 2 soon, and we'll start jumping into Mass Effect 3. I'm trying to get on Twitch a bit more so I can stream that. And then in this next coming week, we have Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, and Towerborn coming out. Depending on how those games land with me, I'll either do independent reviews of them, or I may just talk about them on this podcast. We'll see really what I have time for. I'm getting into a busy part of my year, and that is a good thing. And that is where we are going to wrap up this one. Thank you for listening to the whole episode. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, and subscribe to the Bon Diesel YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this podcast. Thank you to everyone who supports as a YouTube member or a Twitch subscriber. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, please check out the links in the show description. If you have any questions or feedback, comment on Spotify or YouTube. let me know in my Discord or hit me up on social media at Bondiesel or at the Baunfire. That is all I have for this episode of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. So until next time.